All right, Monday morning after Easter.
Yep.
Sometimes we call it the Hangover Monday.
I call it Afterglow. We already.
Fair enough. It's Brandon, Robert, Pete, and Jean. We got four voices in the house today for Digging Deeper. What do we want to talk about today, gentlemen?
Well, I thought Easter was phenomenal. It was a great day. Man, what a awesome, just having everyone there and things like that. Sermon was wonderful. It was awesome. It was wonderful, Brandon.
Thank you, Robert.
It was good.
Congratulations.
I brought more voices on to just make me feel better about myself. Tell me how great it
I like
was.
that shirt, Brandon.
Thank you.
Have you lost weight?
Yes. This is the best episode of Digging Deeper.
Afterglow. No, okay. Getting serious here. You know, part of what you kind of finished up your message with, though, on Easter was you showed a video that we all made early in the morning in the backyard of your father-in-law's house.
And my mother-in-law.
And your mother-in-law.
She lives there, too.
Live there.
Yeah.
But we woke up really early, and for the sunrise, we actually got a bunch of our staff together, and you asked us a couple of questions. But here at this table, as well as Jean is behind the cameras, I was the only one that actually got to answer the questions.
Okay.
Jean was behind the camera there too. You were asking the question and you weren't there.
Pete was still sleeping.
And he was asleep.
He was still sleeping.
And
Yesterday at Easter dinner, they were talking about the video, and my wife goes, "Wait, it was filmed really early in the morning?" And she looks at me and she goes, "So that's why you weren't in the video?"
That's why you weren't
and
in
I was
the
like,
video.
"That's not
Entirely
completely
true. Entirely true, but
That's awesome.
he didn't push back to be in the video.
No, he wasn't hoping for it. So here's your chance to be in the video now. So the question you kind of started out by asking, Brandon, help me with this, is you asked a question and kind of said, you know, we're in between two ages. You talked about that in your message yesterday as well. And so because of that, we still feel the effects and the discouragement, the struggles that we have from the fall, really, and how we're kind of living in that. We're, you know, you asked that big question of, if the resurrection is so world changing, why is the world still not seem like it's fully changed?
Yeah.
And so in what ways do all of y'all kind of see, you know, the same struggles and discouragements in your own lives?
All of y'all. I like that.
All y'all. There's
You've been in Lakeside for a while now.
You know,
There you go.
when in Rome.
All right.
that doesn't apply here."
I'm gonna let Pete and John start off on answer that question, just because I feel like a little bit of my message I alluded to that in my own life. But John, what do you got?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't want to bring the podcast down from the
You
very
kind of
start.
have. It's a very
but
heavy question.
Yeah,
You kind of got to.
I
All
think
right, the world's terrible.
The thing that gives me
We'll
the
get to the bright
most
side,
like
don't worry.
anxiety and I guess maybe a homesickness for what things should be are school shootings. Like innocent kids who end up dying, you know, for the sake of that. And so I think those moments, and then probably when you hear about people who give their own life up, those two moments I think are the thing that rock me the most, where I'm like, there's this homesickness and this ache of like, man, like there is brokenness in this world, and it's so evident in these two things.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, it's just super discouraging, and it feels like it makes you want to dim that light because of the discouragement. So I would say those two things for sure. Yeah. When I hear about them, when I read about them, when they're within even my own specific circles, it's super discouraging.
I hear that. Yeah. How about you, Pete?
I think just related it to the actual message and where it was going. I think the hardest thing I struggle with is not like, it's hard to see a world that doesn't know or believe in God make bad decisions. That's hard. It's just so frustrating to keep seeing people that do believe and claim to know God keep ruining their lives through bad decisions. That's the part where you're just like, I don't know. I think Brandon's whole message about get out of bed, you know, get off, take the pajamas off. Like, it's so like after a while, you're just like having this same conversation of brokenness and our marriage is falling apart, and like all these things. And you're like, I expect to have those conversations with people that have no understanding of God's word or the Holy Spirit, but like having those conversations over and over with people who've been in church their whole lives is the part it was just like, God, what are you doing here? Like, what does this work? Because I get that the world that doesn't believe or accept it or even have the Holy Spirit is struggling, but the people that claim to, when they don't see it work in their lives, that's when you're just like, okay, what are we doing here? It can get it can feel very defeating after a while of just like, And I know like you guys are probably even way more so in the fact that that's much more of your wheelhouse in terms of like doing a lot more personal counseling and things. And it's just like, I don't know. It's hard for me. I just want to like kind of be like, stop it.
That hurt. Pete just hit me in the head.
Yeah.
For those listening on the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ouch. I now have a headache for the rest of this episode, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think that the thing that I've even noticed is there's a huge pendulum swing. It feels like maybe I'm missing context, but it feels like even in our society that there at one point, probably in the 80s, early 90s, that even like a lot of the movies and all that kind of stuff were more Hallmark feel. Like they always had good endings and more positive stuff like that. And it's like there's this whole generation now that's coming in to be movie producers, and a lot of them are now portraying just the pain, the backstory, what brought about the brokenness and the darkness. And so there's a focus on the hurt, the brokenness, and the pain that it seems to be. I think it's important to like take notice of that and not to always think that everything's got a veneer on it and good, but because that's what's always being watched, because that's what's always being reported, because that's what's always being like listened to.
Yeah.
That it seems like it leads to also more of that taking place in people's life. And it's like people are now finding unity in their brokenness and their pain more than they are in their successes and victories.
That's a fascinating observation because I think it's true of our culture.
Absolutely.
You know, we have more vocabulary about our dysfunctions than ever before. Yeah. You know, I mean, it seems like we're more identified by our brokenness openly. Like that's how we talk. It's like we talk about our brokenness more than we do the ways that we're winning, the ways that we're succeeding, and the ways that we're kind of hopeful.
Yeah. I think you might know this. In Australia, they had is it poppy seed syndrome or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was like a way in which in the Australian society, they were known to, once people reached a certain pinnacle of success, they'd intentionally try to cut off kind of like the stalk of the poppy seed to cut them down because they didn't want anybody to rise above anybody else, and they'd rather have people lower. And I feel like that type of phenomenon is kind of what we are starting to see. And so even in terms of people that have breakthrough and success in their Christian life, I think sometimes there's almost a jealousy that can take place. Yeah. And so we'd rather like dismiss it and say, oh, that's probably not real, or, oh, you're not really paying attention to really all your pain. And so it's really hard at times to see the hope of the resurrection because we're just focused on like all the things that are so dark. And I fall prey to that.
Same.
And I think that's where I came from yesterday in the message was like, man, there's a lot of my focus that is getting drawn that direction. And it's not to dismiss some of those things, but there are way more aspects of light than sometimes we give credit to and pay attention to.
Yeah, I think the general feel of storytelling over the past 15, 20 years has become the rise of the anti-hero. The movement away from the clear-cut black and white good guy, bad guy to where the good guy is kind of a bad guy. Nobody's perfect. And there's a part of me that enjoys enjoys the realness of it. Yeah. Like when I watch a film or read a book and the hero is not, perfect John Wayne, never done anything wrong in his life, riding the horse, but it's actually a person that's very broken or whatever, working through their own problems. I think there's something true about what you said because there's something related about like, in your head that those heroes aren't perfect. Yeah. So when they're portrayed that way, you're kind of like, whatever. Then you see someone imperfect, you're like, I relate to that. And so I think what we find is we like stories that we feel like we can relate to the person. Because if they're perfect, I'm sorry, Rabbit, but like I've always made a joke in another context that I think the stupidest superhero is Superman. Because
my favorite.
It's just Superman he's just perfect. Like there's nothing interesting about it. But then I think even looking at like a lot of the new superhero things that have happened over the last 20 years, it's moving away from this clean cut guy who's morally perfect, has no weaknesses, to people that are more human. But while it's more interesting, it does do something to us about creating this thought in our head that like there are no heroes, nobody's actually good, nobody's actually worth following. I think all of that is part of our culture right now. So we were talking
that's good.
the show last night. We were talking about
Oh, you talking about that soccer show, right?
Ted Lasso?
Ted Lasso.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ted Lasso.
because Ted Lasso, the first season of Ted Lasso, I thought was so great because it was just positive and it was just like this guy is just. He's like, I'm just gonna have a good attitude, and like everything was like, and
I like him like
people
that.
didn't want him to, and it was like great. And then the second season was like, well, actually, he's a super broken person who's just pretending to be happy, and his life is really hurt. And like, and as I was watching, I'm like, the only thing I really liked about this show was that he was so positive, and he wasn't another broken person. I have to look at his pain, so I kind of like lost interest in the show, to be honest.
Well, let's be optimists for a second here, because I think that the resurrection has happened. And because of that, we are heading towards Jesus's return, and we get to experience the deliverance and the healing and all the great stuff that you talked about in your message yesterday that defines what it is like since the Messiah came. How do you see some of those glimmers, some of the day breaking, the dawn coming forth, a little bit of like the, here, but not yet, that kind of environment?
I told Jamie yesterday, my highlight yesterday had nothing to do with the service, had nothing to do with the sermon, the music, the video, any of that kind of stuff. I had a guy come up to me whose wife, they had significant marital issues. And he came up to me, and she moved and took the kids back to where they're from. And it's been some months now that have passed. And divorce was filed. And he came up to me yesterday, and he said, hey, the divorce, we're going to look to dissolve that and not go through with it. Like, I've been getting some of the help that I need. She's been having conversations. Things are great. And it's looking like we're going to make this thing work, and she's going to be moving back. And I was just like, that
it's healing
is the hope. Like that there's enough reasons perhaps for them to be divorced based upon, things that have happened. But the resolve to say that we serve a God who can make all things new, and to actually do that and to go through the muck and the mire, to me, that was like, there's the dawn breaking right there. And that was my favorite part of Easter yesterday.
That's great.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
I would say, I think it's the thing that Mr. Rogers says, where it's like when a tragedy happens.
I was told I looked like Mr. Rogers yesterday a couple times. Yeah, with my pajamas on. But anyway, sorry.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah,
I won't make any comments.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of like, look for the helpers. After a tragedy, after something happens, like, we're sold chaos, and we're sold depression, and we're sold problems because our body, like, we crave it, we long for it. It's like a drug that we keep on wanting to go back to. But if you look under that level, there's always the helpers. There's in the crisis, there's Convoy of Hope, or there's, like just people going out and helping. In the moments of like pain and loneliness and sorrow, they're like some of the times that people have felt most connected at Rise City Church is when they're going through something hard, and then the meal train starts, or then the people are praying for them. They're reaching out to them in the hallway. It's even the idea of like, in a secular example, like Disneyland, they try really hard to make their experience great, but what they care more about is fixing a problem when it arises. Like, if you have someone comes and nothing happens, they have like an okay experience. But if someone comes, something bad happens, and then they do everything they can to make it right, you actually leave with like a higher level of satisfaction than you would if nothing had happened. In the Christian sense, it's that when darkness happens, when darkness is encroaching, but Christians are able to respond with light, and respond with hope, and respond with optimism, and respond with the gospel. There's this hope that comes forth that isn't found in other situations. And so it's like, even in those hard times, even those things where it's like, man, I don't understand what's going on or why this is happening. If you shift your perspective and look to the helpers, look to the people who are making a difference there, that's just as real. It just may not be as evident.
That's right. I think that in light of even Good Friday, we call it Good Friday. And I saw this or heard this, or I don't know where I saw it, but it was something to the effect of the fact that we can call the day that Jesus died Good Friday is a reminder that all the stuff that we're going through that's difficult in our life, that there's hope that it can one day be called good too. That God has this power and this redemptive nature to be able to bring things that look terrible and look destructive in our lives and turn it around and use it for good. And that's a great reminder, just even in the name of what we call Good Friday. And so I thought it was powerful. It kind of goes along with what you're saying too.
Yeah.
How about you, Pete?
I thought that what you shared is pretty powerful, John. I like that. I don't know. I'm being somebody that leans pessimistic already. I'm probably not as in tuned with other people's pain as I should be, because it can spiral for me. So one of my ways of sort of dealing with that, I've shared this before, is like kind of keeping my distance from some of it. Like I knew there was a school shooting, but I didn't jump online. I just like, I can't. But the offshoot of that is I often am also missing out sometimes on hearing the good things too, like in sometimes trying to remove myself from filling my mind with too much bad stuff. I don't get a chance to hear the great stories. And so being proactive of like, and even in like when we're in staff meeting or something, it's like, let's just say what good happened this week. Like I like those moments, because just hearing, Mariah say, hey, this happened in kids ministry this week, or you being like this came, just these random stories. I'm like, yeah, good. Like the more, like I love hearing those from other people, because sometimes I'm a little bit too detached in order to like avoid the bad. I sometimes avoid what is good as well. And so I think it's just generally speaking in my life, I'm analyzing more and thinking about what have been the negative consequences sometimes of maybe like trying to guard myself too much and sometimes missing out on some of the good that's going around me. Because there is a lot of good. There are great stories. And even just sort of, it was kind of random. Like last night, we're recording this on Monday. We had kind of an Easter dinner at our house last night, and my dad started talking a little bit about his story to you.
Yeah.
And I've heard his story many times. But it was just interesting sitting there and like, he's like, yeah, I was 17. I hated everybody. I wanted to kill my mom. And you were like, what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it caught me off guard. I was like, did you say you wanted to kill your mom? Yeah. You almost, you didn't say you wanted to. You said you almost killed your mom. And they told me the story. And I was like,
what?
Whoa.
Like okay.
When people, I don't know if my dad listens to this or not, but
I almost asked for details, and I was like,
I'll just say this. Who was it? Liz Amaral yesterday. She comes and goes, I just love your dad. He is the nicest, kindest, sweetest person.
I think so too.
And there's a part of me that's always like, and I'm not saying like my dad used to be a monster, but I think to myself, like, people would not have said about my dad when he was 18, one day they're going to say he's the nicest, sweetest, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
Like the power of the Holy Spirit changed the direction of my father and led to a very different kind of life than where he was going before. It works. He works. Like God works. Like, God changes people. And there's so many people who, are followers of Jesus who, it's like they're the stories we don't talk about. We talk about the broken ones that they're really still living in all their, like, we don't talk about the millions and millions of people who are waking up every day, like enjoying the blessings of God and the favor that comes from obedience and being led by the Spirit, who are, you know what I mean? Like they're just living good lives and experiencing the goodness of it. Mm-hmm. We don't tell a lot of those stories because they're just kind of the normal ones, but they're out there.
So I'm kind of an optimist and a dreamer, and so it's a little bit more natural for me. But it doesn't mean that I don't get discouraged or frustrated.
That's why we have to sit on the same side of the table. We balance each other. Neither side of the table gets too dark or too heavy. Or like,
if I start to get overly positive, he punches me, and then when you're the most balanced guy on our staff, remember?
I punch you, and then you say, you know what? There's probably good from you hitting me. Something good will come out of that.
Yeah, you know what? I can't wait till this headache goes away. Okay. It's gonna feel like a whole new head again. But no, but when you're in the middle of situations and circumstances around you that feel discouraging, how do you guys keep yourself encouraged? What do you do to constantly remind yourself to be a hopeful person and to be outwardly hopeful as well?
I would say my greatest help is my 4 children, because I don't want them to just be pessimists and cynics in their life. And I see still like this beautiful innocence in their life as children. Yeah. That's not marred by life experience yet or disappointment. And they're starting to enter into those stages as they get older that they're going to have those hurts and pains. But I see in the most raw and beautiful sense, like in their youth, like that they still have their eyes open with wonder and they still have hopefulness and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't want to see that completely marred And so for me, it's like, for the sake of my kids, I want to keep fighting to say, I will find hope and I will point that out. And so like one of the things we do around the dinner table a lot of nights is like, before they go to bed every night, we go through the same thing. They're probably sick of saying it, but one of the things is like, God has big plans for my life and I'm ready. And they have to repeat this. And so we sit around the table and just ask, like, how did you see God work today in you or around you? And sometimes there's like, I don't know, someone was nice, like it's not like this is a significant spiritual moment all the time, but like I'm just trying to help them and help me. Like it's like it works both ways. I'm trying to help myself. Like,
I love that.
Oh, cool. Like in that interaction today with that classmate, you saw God work in this, or you felt God work in your life through this, and that encourages my soul to know that there's still glimmers of hope as well. Because it seems like sometimes when you get around adults, like there's less of that's shared and more of the garbage that's kind of passed on.
Yeah, we can unite over dysfunction more than we can like good function. So how about you guys? What do you guys do and how do you kind of stay encouraged?
Yeah, I would say don't like underestimate the power of wise counsel in your life. I know that when I am feeling discouraged, it's really easy for me to live in my head. And then stories blow way out of proportion in my head than they actually are in real life. So when I'm able to talk to someone, and that's where the wise counsel comes in, because you can find someone who will just like magnify that, and then you guys can all commiserate together and hate the world. But when you have wise counsel and someone who you can be like, all right, I respect this person and they're going to shoot me straight. Like they're going to tell me how it is. For me, that helps me just like get shaken. Yeah.
I was like, watch your mouth, man.
Shooken shoe. Be careful.
It shakes me out of whatever like funk I am in, and it kind of helps me see a new perspective. A lot of people on staff are that for me. My wife is definitely that for me. It's just, instead of bottling it in and allowing it to become a story that's not true, it's sharing it with people who care about me, who I do believe see the world in a way that I want to see it. And they help me kind of change that perspective.
Going back to what I said earlier about media and movies and all that kind of stuff, like this, I don't have any evidence of this, but I tend to believe that now a lot of the people who are writing movies are probably in the millennial generation and some of those types of things. And there's unity and commiseration.
There is.
But I think there's also, in knowing kind of your personality type, John, and I can gravitate in that direction as well, but it is like writing lots of new scripts and narratives in your head and thinking more things happen maybe than are reading things more.
100%.
And sometimes I feel like the outlet is today's movies. Is like that there are a lot of people that are even looking back and interpreting things of their past, and some being very real, but others like they were in a very isolated situation, or they were only talking about other people that were really in struggled situations. And so one of the outlets is for them to produce movies that are accentuated narratives that may or may not be fully true, but it's what was in their head.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't have any evidence of it, but I just see some of the things where I'm like, that's a pretty, to connect that to that to that to that to that, like that could have happened.
Like culture's kind of spiraling out together.
Yeah, and I just think that like it's important to have people in your life, like you're saying, to be able to process these things with, or when you're starting to create that type of narrative in your mind and think this is what they mean.
Yeah.
Be willing to ask the question, is this what you meant? Yeah. And actually addressing it, because that helps diffuse things oftentimes. Or maybe it does clarify, and they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I meant." But if you don't ask, it helps. But if you don't do that, it just, you can keep. I mean, I've been there. You start making them like, especially text messages, right? Like, oh my gosh, like what does this mean? They only put 2 dots instead of 1.
The misinterpretation
it was all caps. That means they're yelling, or whatever. You're just like, it's maddening because we all do it. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. How about you, Pete?
Could you repeat the question? I mean, I remember generally speaking, like, what do we do to find optimism, kind of?
Yeah, like how do you keep yourself encouraged and keep on looking at the hope rather than focusing on the darkness?
Well, it's funny because we're having this kind of, it's almost like what they might call a meta moment. We're having a conversation about discouragement and talking. I don't.
What?
Well, we're literally, this conversation is about how we get discouraged, and now we're talking about negative things in the world.
Yeah.
I will say that lately in my own life, nothing, let me finish my thought. Okay. Nothing works. Nothing works except one thing. And I agree with what you said, John. And I'm not disagreeing with it. I just know in my life, even just sitting down, like with my wife, or sometimes I meet with Matt, you kind of comes with this, like whatever that person says, I have an answer for it. Well, what about this? I don't know. Like I can justify, I can explain, I can find a negative to everything. And oftentimes just sitting there talking to someone, I don't walk away thinking, okay, I'm all better now. And I got over the past month, I've battled depression my entire life. And I now at 40,
49,
44.
44.
I recognize the signs and I know to start like, oh crap, or whatever, like it's coming. But like for like a week, like I just need to talk to some people, and that didn't change anything. Then I just kind of had this moment about a week ago. It was a Saturday, and I'm just like, nothing is working and nothing is gonna work. There's only one thing that can work. Mm-hmm. And I told my wife I'm leaving. I got in my car and I came here to the church. It was Saturday night.
Not leaving her, just leaving the house.
Yes. Nothing's working.
Trying to clarify that.
No, I came to the church and I just put my earbuds in with some worship music, and I just spent about 2 hours in the auditorium with God.
Yeah.
I walked out of the auditorium feeling, whatever the word you want to put in there, positive, optimistic for the first
Hopeful.
time in months. And basically told myself, okay, this is the only thing that works. And so I put a note in my phone, a little calendar thing, just like I'm doing this every day, the month of April. And today's probably day 8, I guess, since then. And every day that I just get my Bible, a little journal, my music, and I'm just like, God, I don't need, I sometimes need a counselor. Like right now, I don't need a counselor. I don't need my wife. I don't need a pastor. I need you to speak life and hope. And I need your words inside of me. I need like when you speak, it's like, there's nothing else that compares to the moment that God speaks, whether it's through the scriptures or the spirit. Like that is life-giving. Like that is it's like the Bible talks about this, like, this unending well of water springing up in you. Like that is life. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate counsel. And there are many times I need counsel, especially when I'm making a decision or something. But when I'm at my darkest moments, I need his voice. Like I need him saying truth to me that is so undeniable. I can't argue with God. I can nitpick my wife and, you didn't think of this way. You said that, but you haven't thought about this. When God speaks, I'm like, you're right. And he always knows what to say. Like I was like on Monday, I'm in my 3rd day, and one of these group of guys have been praying for us. They all have Knights of the Round Table names. They're praying for us as pastors. Yeah. And one of the guys, I don't know who it is, didn't tell me his name. He sent me a verse in Isaiah, and it was just like exactly what I needed at that moment. And I opened up to Isaiah and I read the whole chapter, and like that is what brings me out of what I'm in. And more than anything else, of just like his presence, his life in my lungs again. It stirs me in ways that nothing else can. I can't argue with it. I have no excuses for it. I can't outthink it. When God speaks to me, it's just like, and I was writing in my journal the other day, and I just kind of wrote this sentence down to myself, and it was like, the most life that I get is when you speak. No wonder Satan keeps trying to distract me from listening. Like I get so negative and so pessimistic and so cynical, and just the world starts to look so ugly and dark when I am further and further away from his presence. And it's just like, that's my whole life battle, is just Satan constantly trying to move me away from God's presence. Absolutely. To stop listening, to stop reading my Bible, to stop praying. Because as soon as I do, I just drift into this dark place. And then it takes one moment of just coming back and sitting at his feet for just, there he is, there's life again. What was the question?
I think you're nailing it, man. Okay. Yeah, no, it's great.
Sorry. Is that, I didn't
how do you
answer.
Stay
he answered
hopeful,
it.
man. You answered it. Yeah, really well.
I also find encouragement from the Holy Spirit too.
Some of us more spiritual.
I'm sitting here, and I know we gotta get ready to close, but I'm listening, and I'm in this whole like. I was telling Robert this when we were driving, like the whole idea of how God speaks. Like I'm listening, and you say that, and I'm like, absolutely. But I'm also like, you're a significant introvert.
Yeah.
And so like to be by yourself and to be in your own head and to hear God's voice, like the way you describe him at times is like he's a chatterbox. Like he'll just like talk to you like that. Where an extrovert really processes through God's people too, because they feel like God is a chatterbox in that regard. And so I think sometimes as people are listening, just to like, the commonality is like you have to find the way to get back to God's truth, God's presence, and how he's speaking to you, whether it be through your friend, through your wife, or in the stillness and the quiet, and to be open, whether you're introverted, extroverted, to pursue God in both of those endeavors, through people or in private.
I think both.
Yeah. And so I think that when we don't anchor ourselves in God's truth and pursue his presence in the form that we are most commonly accustomed to hearing him, then that's when we can really derail. And so we have to keep putting ourselves back in that direction.
Absolutely.
So
if you're looking for the hope of the resurrection in your life, open your Bible, pray, seek his face, seek his voice. I think that's all valid. I think that's all really important stuff. So,
and let your conversations gravitate on these things. Like I had a few different text messages today, which were really encouraging. Like they actually took me serious of saying, I made the comment, which was like, I want to take over your lunch conversation and dinner conversation, which is something that pastors, I've heard that many times. But I was like, I really want you to talk about this. And I've got pastor friends like, how many people made decisions to follow Jesus at your church on Easter? And I was like, I have no idea. I actually encourage them to talk about it at lunch. Because if you start making that common, which is not very common right now, is like, let's talk about how God's working. Let's talk about how Jesus is doing this. Let's do that. Also helps it become not so like mystical and out there and weird, but versus like, it's like it's here and now and it's with us and the kingdom has come.
It's not so compartmentalized in different areas of your life.
Yeah. And so it's good to make it prominent in your conversations is helpful too. So
I don't know. Your altar call was pretty powerful. You got every single person to stand in the auditorium.
I did. I'm going to send it out to my pastor's friends. The entire church got saved. I'm going to text that out to them right now. I'm like looking at all their numbers. I was like, man, how do you guys even have those numbers that soon? Like, I don't even know what our attendance was yet.
Right.
So, but it was a great Sunday.
It was a great Sunday.
And there's another one coming. We're going to kick off a new series this week, right?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
We're going to look at frequently asked questions, FAQ. So those things that I kind of was setting the stage with the Easter sermon to talk about the things that oftentimes that can make us feel discouraged, or the questions maybe we ask wondering whether or not, is this whole thing viable? And so we're going to actually unpack some of those questions over the next couple months. Okay. And we've got different people speaking, and we'll kind of share those questions this week as far as what we're going to be addressing. But that starts this Sunday, and then we've got the one meal in 2 weeks from now on the 23rd of April.
Pretty excited about that.
A lot of fun things coming up. So
all right, well, keep joining with us, and we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper.